Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Arming IT Security Teams for the U.S. Secret Service Tactics, brought to you by eMedia and Citrix. I'm Karen Bannon and I'll be your moderator for today. We have just a few quick notes before we begin. Slides will advance automatically throughout our event. In addition, the console you're looking at is customizable. This means you can move and resize any of the windows you see open, as well as explore the widgets at the bottom of your screen. We'd like this event to be as interactive as possible, so at this time we invite you to ask any questions you may have using that question box on the left side of your screen. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the event. And finally, an on-demand presentation will be available after our event, and attendees will receive a link via email. The U.S. Secret Service has been protecting the leaders of the United States, their families, and visiting VIPs for more than 100 years with an extraordinary record of success. How they do it and what you can learn from the agency's experience is something we will discuss today. In fact, during today's webinar, our expert speakers will discuss the secrets behind the Secret Service's success, the methodology it's using, and how to architect security for a workplace on the move, as well as implement defense in depth to deploy best practices for securing your infrastructure, apps, and data. So with that, I'd like to introduce our experts, Martin Zukacht and Eric Byers. Martin is a senior architect, security, and automation at Citrix. His combined skills as an IT consultant and developer led him to a career in IT, which he has sustained for the past 15 years. Prior to his current role, he worked as a Citrix consultant in more than 30 different countries around the globe. Currently, he's a member of the technical marketing team, and he is an ex-Microsoft MVP for scripting and ex-Microsoft MVP for server setup and deployment. Eric Byers is a lead security architect, worldwide professional services at Citrix. In his role, Eric is the overall technical and practice lead of Citrix cybersecurity consulting practice. Previously, he was a principal sales engineer and solution architect working with the largest enterprises of Canada to help develop and realize their visualization, cloud, and networking strategies and vision. As the enterprise architect of Citrix Consulting Canada, Eric architected many large global Citrix deployments with high security kept at top of mind. And with that, let's get started. Martin, I turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Karen, very much. So the presentation that we are going to show you today originates from last year when I was reading one of the old biographies from one of the U.S. secret agents. And I found it fascinating how they not only talked about the same concepts that we are using in IT security, but they were actually using also the same language. So they talk about defense in depth and multi-layered security. So we thought, why don't we combine these two topics together, and why don't we talk about how the Secret Services actually operate? So let's start by a quick introduction of the United States Secret Service. This is a federal agency that was formed over 150 years ago. And initially it was responsible for financial crimes. In 1901, the protection of national and visiting leaders was added as another responsibility, which makes sense because it was shortly after the presidential assassinations. Now, if you have a look at what this agency is doing, it's responsible for protection of the presidents, vice presidents, immediate family, all the visiting national leaders, presidential candidates, and their families as well. So they are protecting a lot of people that are publicly exposed, that are highly visible, highly valuable targets. And they are doing this for almost 120 years. And in all those years, there was only one president that was killed. There were only 6 situations where the assassins actually got close to the victim, but still, Secret Service was able to stop the assassination. And there was only one agent that was killed while actively protecting the president. So it's incredible if you think they are doing this for such a long time and they are so successful. So what is the secret to their success? How are they doing this? Let me start by saying the presentation that we are going to give to you today, there's a lot of insight into why the Secret Service is so successful, but there is no official documentation. There are no official guidelines. They have secret in the name for a purpose. So what we've done is that we went through almost all the books that are available on this topic, interviews, articles, and we try to kind of put together the picture of one of the typical days of this agency. We cannot guarantee, of course, that this is correct, but what we try to do is that we wanted to make it as accurate as possible, so we try to confirm everything from multiple sources. So when we talk about the U.S. Secret Service, what most people imagine, thanks to the media, is that their job is to take a bullet for the president or someone else. But that's only what you see in the movies. That's not their responsibility in real life. The big question, would you take a bullet for the president? The question itself is actually really bad, because their job is to do everything they do to prevent this from ever happening, or prevent this from ever even coming close. So if you have to take the bullet for the protectee, that actually means that you failed with your job. Your job is protection and prevention, not taking a bullet for someone. So that's a very important lesson for us to learn. Secret Service is heavily focused on prevention and planning. Bodyguards, the ones that you see in the movies, for example, that's only the last line of protection, and that's actually a sign that they failed in what they are responsible for. So what we are going to do now is that we are going to take you through the sample scenario where the President of the United States is going to talk at venue. And what we will do is that we are going to take you all the different phases of the planning, how it's being approached, what are the active measurements against potential attackers, and so on. Now, one quick disclaimer, this is still IT presentation, so even if we wanted to keep it as real as possible, this is just the storytelling session. So what we use on this slide is that we are going to show you the venue. We are going to tell you how all the different teams and people behave. In this example, we are going to use the gray color for the Secret Service agents. We are going to use orange for all attendees. We always assume they are potentially dangerous. And finally, we are going to use the blue color for Protectee or the president itself. In IT analogy here, what we are going to do is that the blue color is the data, which is effectively what we try to do in IT security, protect the data at all costs. The orange color are the end users that are trying to access this data. And finally, the gray color is going to represent all the active security appliances, firewalls, antivirus, and so on. So let's have a look at the venue. Let's have a look at the event that we are planning. What we are planning to do here is very simple. The president is going to come. He will give a speech. And what organizers want to do is that they would like to arrange all the visitors in a circle around the president. So everyone can see him, everyone can talk to him, and he's very close to everyone around him. Now, if you would take this hypothetical scenario and try to implement the traditional IT security approach to this, what you would most probably end up with is something like this. The IT administrator would most probably say, okay, so for every single attendee, we are just going to have one Secret Service agent, and they will make sure that everything is okay. This is equivalent to you just deploying antivirus on every single machine that you have and just hoping that the system will never be compromised. Now, when you see it from this perspective, you probably already think this is traditional IT security, but this doesn't look very effective from this perspective. And that's actually correct, and that's one of the points that we would like to make in this presentation today. So let's move on to the phase one. Phase one for the Secret Service agents is the assessment. Before you can start planning, you need to understand the venue, and you need to understand what's going to happen and where this event is going to happen. So the Secret Service agents visit the venue a couple of times, not only once, before the event actually happens. The first visit is typically about 3 months before the event. And what they are doing during the assessment is they are not looking only at the building. They are assessing the whole city, the airport, who the president is going to meet with, who are the attendees, who's going to serve the food, for example, or the drinks, and they try to understand every single piece of information they can gather at this moment. So, for example, if the Secret Service agent will look at this request from the organizers, what he's going to see are potential attack vectors. He's going to see how the potential attacker could get to the president. Of course, he's going to suspect every single attendee can be dangerous. Let's always assume the worst. But it's not only about the attendees in the same room. So the Secret Service agent in this case is also going to look on all the other attack vectors. He's going to understand, I have the windows. Maybe someone can shoot through the window. I have different rooms that are connecting to this big room. So maybe someone can hide in the closet and he can store the room. So during this assessment phase, the idea is very simple. It's mostly about understanding all the potential attack vectors and understanding the venue, the route, who's going to be there, who is he going to meet with, and so on. So now I would like Eric to talk a bit about this assessment phase from an IT security perspective.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, assessment is all about understanding your requirements, your capabilities, risks, and concerns. We don't just have a single event in IT. We often have a 24/7 live system that must be constantly secured, and not all of our assets have the extreme value of the president, but some will. So the things we want to understand in assessment phases are things like the context we are in, such as the understanding corporate security standards, laws, regulations, and guidance, which is the framework in which you have to work within due to industry or corporate standards. Next, understanding if you have a risk-adverse or risk-taking posture towards security, and understanding your availability requirements, which might be different for different workloads or different users or different lines of business, and different risk areas that are general areas to focus risk on. You also want to spend some time defining likely security incidents. And what is a security incident? Defining likely security incidents can be an entertaining or a depressing exercise in which you pontificate on various what-if scenarios and discuss single failures or compound failures that could occur. Defining what is a security incident is also important, as there are incidents in which can occur that are not directly related to the security team, and you really want to get the right team involved as quick as possible. As an overall statement, I think if you understand your requirements, you understand your capabilities, you should understand your gap or your safety that you have within your system. And spending more time on the requirements gathering and getting more granular with your users and workload requirements will help you refine those requirements, where if you know your capabilities, you understand your safety margin. Two common assessments that should be done frequently are vulnerability assessments and pen testing or penetration testing. It is common to see quarterly or annual automated vulnerability assessments as a standard cadence for that testing. And from that testing, many issues, possibly some false positives, are there to address and investigate. At Citrix Consulting, we also have a security assessment offering and a team to help customers understand and start increasing their security posture. Once the initial assessment is completed, though, from that point, we can use that as an input to begin our planning. Martin, can you tell us about how the Secret Service comprehensively plans their protections?
Yeah, so now we start talking. So the Secret Service agent will see this and he will decide, we cannot do this. We have way too many attack vectors. We need to start planning how we approach this venue. So that is the second stage, the planning phase. Now, what is important here to understand or interesting is that Secret Services actually have two different details. One is investigation, which is mostly responsible for the financial crimes and investigation of the background data and the cybercrime as well. The second one is protection detail, where you have the actual agents that you see in the field. Before you are allowed to join the protection detail, you must spend at least 2 years in investigation detail. And the reason why this is done this way is that they don't want agents that are only muscles. They want agents that can use the head, because the planning is more important than the actual protection. Now, planning involves everything. It involves when you route closest hospitals, potentially dangerous people in the area, and so on. So, for example, when they are planning the routes to the venue, they always make sure that at every single point, they know exactly how to get to the closest hospital. In that hospital, there is always going to be at least one agent that is stationed there and stay there during the whole visit, just in case. In the car, in the presidential limo, you are always going to have the blood bags available just in case if there needs to be transfusions. So as you see, the goal is to plan every single second of the visit and make sure that you remove all the potential attack vectors. So with this information, let's look at the situation again. We have the president in the middle, then we have circle, and we have him surrounded by all the people. What the Secret Service agent would do is just change this. Why don't we move the president to this way? That means that all the potential attack vectors are in front of him. There is wall behind him, so no one can come from here. And we also have escape route available just in case if we need this. So we don't need to protect him from 360 degrees. Now, what they are also going to do here, as explained before, we have different attack vectors, not only the attendees, is have a look at the building and decide, can we just close these doors and can we just barricade them? Can we close these rooms? Can we make sure they are locked? Can we just make sure that anyone who would like to come closer to our protectee needs to come from this single direction? And the goal here is very simple. We are effectively reducing the attack surface by closing the doors or blocking the windows or just rearranging all the attendees. What this allows us is that instead of having 100 agents in the same room for each and every attendee, we can have maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 agents and provide much better protection to our protectee. So we are just changing our chances. We are doing a little planning, but the security overall is much, much, much better than it was. And as I described before, you always want to have also escape routes. So in this case, there are going to be some agents that are not visible, but they are always making sure that this escape route is available as well. So as you can see, just by planning, by reducing the attack surface, we are already changing completely the situation and making sure that we can protect the president. So Eric, can you talk to us a little bit about the planning engagements that you are doing?
Sure. Yeah, so from the assessment phase, we really try to address the risk based off of the need from what we've gathered. Planning, I think, seems a bit extreme for the Secret Service, but it should be, right? And in IT, we often find ourselves being busy just keeping the lights on, and we obviously need more dedicated planning time set aside. With that, we often have to think about prioritization, putting important tasks first along with easy wins, plan for long-term, continual, positive improvements. But we live in a world of continual events and not just a single event. Design documentation is super important. We need to have a thorough process for planning and justifying the decisions. And we need to keep that documentation up to date. It's very common that we do a design documentation exercise and then it's static until the end of the life of the product, which is unfortunate. We want to think about contingency planning. You had a lot of good examples of contingency planning, with the hospitals and so forth. Really this includes a variety of other planning, including stuff like disaster recovery planning, business continuity planning, from the likely security incidents. How can we build our system to adapt or change to address those actual contingencies? Where DRP focuses on how to recover a service upon a significant service failure, BCP is more about recovering the business for operations, right? So we need to plan for both of those things. We want to also budget for time for various resources, time, money, people, software, hardware, possibly even cloud is the new one, of course. Because we don't necessarily know what we're going to need in the future, we always want to have a bit of a buffer there to deal with any upcoming unforeseen events. And we also want to think about how we're going to update the system that we've built. We need to plan for frequent updates, and we need to do that in a way that is properly tested and doesn't destabilize production when introducing a security patch or introducing a new version of a software. And really, we really believe in thorough testing, but also We also have great imaging technology that allows us to update systems very efficiently. From the standard diagram of Citrix, this shows we can build secure enclaves, and this is one of the key ideas. It allows us to move our applications and our data under the control of IT in the data center, pulling it off of the endpoint. This is a great way to contain insecure applications and data components such as older browsers, while still making it reasonable for operations and enabling compensating controls to be put into the right place. We'll be diving deeper throughout this presentation on this diagram, but now that we've done sufficient assessment and planning, we can now start our protection activities. Martin, can you tell us a bit about the Secret Service protections?
Yeah, so imagine this. You just spent 3 months planning the visit of the president, and the day is here. So the day the president just landed, he arrived, and what's happening now is that you are moving to the next phase, which is active protection. This is on the day of the event. And what you want to do here is that you want to have as many as possible different security layers. So here we start talking about multi-layered security and try to have as many different security layers as possible. What I found very interesting here is that if you think the Secret Service, there are many security layers that you see and there are many security layers that you don't see. So for example, we understand that the agents that are standing next to the president are going to have the guns. That's kind of visible security. But there are many things that we don't see, and of course the security is actually based on this one. So to give you one example is, if you have a close look at this picture, the presidential limo, it's codenamed Beast. It's actually more like a tank than a car. So it's of course custom made. It's heavily armored, and you can see it on the door. The doors actually weight about the same as the doors in the airplane. So this is one example of invisible security. You just see normal car, but you don't see all the security elements that are available here. Now, you might think, okay, so I understand there is this kind of invisible security, and there are many things that we don't even see, but why do you need the visible security? What does it even mean? Let me give you an example on this slide. So if you have a look at the person on the right side, it's very clear to you, yes, this is Secret Service agent. How do you know it? First, you probably notice the communication earpiece. It's very visible. It's recognizable. We all know what this means. Maybe you notice the blue LiPo pin. This one is going to be worked by all the Secret Service agents that are deployed here. And the idea, why do they do this? Why are they using the same communication earpiece that was used in 70s and 80s? Don't they have a budget for modern technology? They want to make this visible. This means that if you are approaching the agent, you know there are some people here that are responsible for protection, so I'm going to be careful with my actions. You are showing some of your security elements, saying, we are watching you, we have agents deployed here, think twice about what you are doing. Another really good example for this kind of visible security is if you are entering the venue, there's going to be a magnetometer at the entrance. So if you are carrying the gun with you, the chances are that as soon as you see this, you are going to turn around and walk out. So it's visible security. Even if they are not functional, it's going to deter you right away. And as we will talk later on, there are some special agents that are responsible only for observing, and as soon as they will see that you turn around when you see the visible security element, they are going after you to find out why did you change your mind. Another example, as I was talking before at the assessment and planning phase, is Secret Service also checks all the potential suspects in the area. So mostly the class 3. What class 3 means is that it's someone who's capable of performing attacks. So for example, have military training, have weapons at home, knows how to shoot. And he also has motivations. For example, someone who's that doesn't like the Protectee, or have some motivation why he should attack him. So what agents are doing is that they will actually visit all these people in the area before this date, and they are just going to talk. They are just going to let them know, we know about you, we know that you have a weapon, we know that you posted something on the social media. On this date, what are you planning to do? We would recommend you, maybe you should go out of the city. And if you are staying, we just wanted to let you know there's always going to be some agent assigned to you that will watch your every step. So it's again, visible security element just to tell this person, we know about you and we wanted to show you that we have some security. In IT, this is actually very simple. It's all the, for example, session recording or the disclaimers that are displayed or the security agents that are visible on the machines. You always want to make sure that you also have some visible security, and it really helps, for example, with insiders. Now, to give you one final example of invisible security, what I'm showing you now is Miguel Caballero. This is a company from Colombia that specialized in producing the bulletproof clothes, jackets, and so on that look like regular jackets. So even if security is visible, it can actually hide a punch or hide some kind of invisible security layers. And this is one example. By looking at these models, you would never think they are wearing the bulletproof clothes. So as mentioned before, you want to combine as many as possible visible, invisible layers together, and ideally you also want them to integrate and cooperate with each other. So how does it apply to our venue? Maybe you noticed that there are two doors behind the president that I kind of forgot to close. I completely ignored them. And that's the reason why we are doing this. So why are these two windows open? We have another part of the U.S. Secret Services that is actually going to help here, and that's the counter-sniper team. So what this team is responsible for is very simple. They are supposed to provide invisible protection from above. They are supposed to be completely invisible, but always be ready to strike or do whatever is needed to protect the president. Usually they are just on the lookout for suspicious behavior, meaning they are looking for people that are wearing a jacket, for example, in warm weather. They are looking for people with their hands in the pockets. They are looking for people that are sweating excessively, or they are just generally looking for unusual emotional reaction. Now, what happens if this counter-sniper team finds someone who's suspicious is that they are going to cooperate with the field agents, and they are just going to inform them, you have someone in heavy jacket on this location, you should go there and check him and make sure he's not holding on to something. So we have a team that's completely invisible and is actually working with the field agents. If something happens in the venue, if something happens in the room itself, what you are going to see is that this team is going to strike as soon as there is some danger to the president from the outside. Now, Eric can actually talk to us about one exciting technology that we have that's kind of counterpart of the sniper team.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Yeah, the counter-sniper team is very similar to what we have as a technology called Hypervisor Introspection, also known as HVI. So what HVI does is it allows third-party security vendors to protect VMs on the hypervisor from the perspective of the hypervisor. And it's invisible to the operating system and to the attacker from their perspective. So an attacker would have to have a minimal attack surface within the VM, and as they would have to know the security tool is in place, directly attack it, prior to even setting off the alarms when failing attempts within the VM. The other neat thing I think about Bitdefender HVI is that it watches the memory, even with memory randomization. And we have seen many attacks that only reside in memory, not on the file system. And there's a lot of traditional security tools in place today where they're only watching the file system. So there's a variety of attacks that wouldn't even be detected by standard tools. Another great example on that slide is HVI would have stopped WannaCry on an unpatched XP machine. You know, this was even before as it was a 0-day, as nobody knew about WannaCry, it was protecting that system because of the way it watches the system, which is great. So I'd like to talk a little bit about overall protection, the phase there. We want to provide availability, integrity, and confidentiality. These are the basic tenets of security. We want to also think about applying defense in depth principles as the Secret Service does. We want to build multiple walls and barriers to make it more difficult and really pessimistically assuming that any single security control can fail is kind of the right attitude. There's also another perspective we look at when we think about defense in depth, which is including starting with a defensible infrastructure and then building upon that depth for adding operational excellence, situational awareness, and countermeasures to that depth. We want to also think about creating secure entry points and secure enclaves. It's one of the key messages that we're trying to deliver here for sure, is creating controlled entry points with strong encryption and strong authentication into secure zones that have been very effective by using NetScaler and XenApp and XenDesktop. We want to leverage multi-factor authentication. Adding a second factor should be mandatory for all external users at the very minimum, and we have several ways to accomplish this. And NetScaler already includes one-time password in case you don't already have a multi-factor authentication to integrate with. There is the standard tools, antivirus, digital loss prevention, malware protections. They shouldn't be discounted, but we don't believe that these tools are sufficient alone. We believe the idea of multiple layers of security. SIM integration, proactive, reactive monitoring, that's a big focus of many of our consulting engagements lately. And several product improvements have also come to light, which has been great. Getting trustworthy information consolidated into a view that you can make informed decisions on is key to a timely and accurate response. And I think, we do a great job there. The last thing I would like to say about protection is just technical policy enforcement, not just written policies, because written policies by themselves don't provide adequate protection. Technical controls should be in place really to ensure end-user compliance. Leveraging these contextual policies of Citrix allows really less micromanagement and more of a dynamic security posture. And we also want to control all the data flows. They should all be understood, controlled, and monitored and documented if possible. The best way to protect something is to eliminate it, to be honest. Reducing that attack surface as much as possible is ideal, but we want to do this at the same time of balancing user experience, right? So reducing the attack surface, usually the first thing is, we have firewalls. We have them at the edge, and maybe we have additional ones internally, but that's only protecting certain traffic flows, right? We want to think about using the NetScaler as an entry point to reduce this attack surface, right? So it allows NetScaler to terminate the TCP and the TLS in the DMZ. It allows the applications residing in a safe place rather than on the user's endpoint, running it in the data center in the right place, as well as adding multi-factor authentication at that secure boundary. Sort of those three things together really provides us a really nice way to control and contain applications and data. But not all users should have the same permissions and capability. We really want to think about contextual policies and understanding minimum requirements to really restrict their users to the minimum risk. We want to lock down user environments, restrict user and application permissions to a minimum, disable unnecessary services. If you don't need them, why introduce the risk? And we also want to think about restricting or filtering internet traffic. Should your administrators have administrative access at the same time they can go to the internet? Probably not. But does a user need to be able to see ads? Do they need to be able to go to a social media site? We've definitely seen an uptick in the customers deploying additional browsers and secure enclaves to separate the insecure browsing processes from running on the user's endpoint or from within their virtual session to avoid a ransomware attack vector and many other things that could come into our systems. The hottest topic, I think, in recent security projects has been whitelisting and blacklisting of applications and URLs. We've done a lot of work with this lately and helping automate it as much as possible, but really we're trying to build a trusted platform for our users to do their work on. So defense in depth is a great technique. We leverage it in several ways to provide that depth. We talked about NetScaler terminating TCP and TLS and authentication. We also talked a bit about Hypervisor Introspection, which we talked about, which is protecting, watching the memory from a secured point. We also have techniques like smart access and smart control. And they coordinate dynamic user policies between the entry point, the NetScaler, and the backend, allowing policies to be dynamic and contextual, avoiding micromanagement of policies and sort of a runaway problem of having too many settings and too many policies. Overarching all of these technologies, we have Citrix Analytics, where we are in a great position to get all the data points from several components, consolidate and provide a summary of risks, and allowing us to separate some of the noise from information that is relevant to be actionable upon. So we've provided a secure controlled infrastructure, a way to manage the users and dynamically associate policies, and as well as a way to watch everything that's happening within the environment as to our perspective. So Martin, how would the Secret Service react when something goes wrong?
Yes, so that's the exciting part, isn't it? Also in IT security. So you can spend as much time as you want in the planning and the protection, but there's probably going to be a moment when you need to react. So you've been planning for this, you had multiple security defenses, but something really went wrong. And what's important here is your time to reaction. So if it takes you 24 hours to actually find out something bad happened, then you are going to have much bigger problems than if you can react within a couple of minutes. And what you want to do here is that you don't want to focus on the how the attackers could do something. You can kind of skip this phase, but you always want to ask, what am I going to do if this happened? I don't know how it's going to happen. I just know somehow I ended up in this situation. So to show you this kind of transition between the protection to reaction phase, I have a very short video to show you. What you are looking at is called Dylan Tactical Vehicle. And as you notice, within 10 seconds, it kind of switched from the protection service to the action service. So within a few seconds, we are able to respond to any threat to the president. And you want your IT to be designed in the same way. As soon as you confirm there's security breach or security incident, you want to have a team and you want to have processes in place that can respond immediately. So for the U.S. Secret Service, this team is called CAT, Counter Assault Team. And this is the heavy-hitting tactical assault team. Now, what you see in the movies is that when someone attacks the president, all the secret agents, all the bodyguards will take out their weapons and start shooting back. But in real life, that's not their job. Their job is to make sure that the president is safe. And their job is to make sure that if something like this happens, get him off the stage as soon as possible. Do not engage the combatants. Do not waste your time. Just get him out as soon as possible. The CAT team is responsible for engaging and diverting the attackers to buy the time needed for this evacuation. So this is the team that is responsible for actually laying down suppressing fire and luring the attackers into the firefight itself. So how would our scenario look like from this perspective is that the CAT team is always very close, and they are ready to storm into the building or storm into the room. They are probably waiting here on the back, and as soon as there is confirmed security incident happening, they know they rush into the room, start shooting, lay down the fire, and try to evacuate the president as soon as possible. And that's the responsibility of the agents. So what you always want to have is clear responsibilities. We are switching to aggressive mode. There is clear moments when it's confirmed it's a security incident. React right away, and everyone knows in advance who's going to do what. And you want to achieve the same goals with your IT security, where planning, protection, prevention is extremely important, but so is your ability to be able to respond.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, so in the react phase, we want to contain, eradicate, and recover. We want to really restrict that attack, remove the attack, and recover any systems, which also may include the remediation. Knowing what you can do while still maintaining evidence is required and is very important. You don't want to destroy evidence. You don't want to leave systems unprotected. So you don't want to get into a situation where you just don't know what to do. And everybody really should know their roles and responsibilities in a crisis, and we should also have effective communication between those parties. Several things within Citrix technologies we focus on is, of course, real-time monitoring. You know, we saw with the Secret Service, live secure communication through the earpiece is super important for an effective active response. So getting the right information at the right time without overloading systems with too much communication is really key to being successful. Autonomic scaling and dynamic resources. And we want to build systems that grow based on requirements or shrink based off of requirements. We want to look at contextual policies, systems that dynamically change based on our access or our user scenario. We want to think about dynamic routing and automated failure, systems that heal. And we also want to think about deploying system updates and configuration systems that adapt, right? So overall, we have a great React capability within Citrix, providing us the right level of information at the right time, and is really the foundation for a defensible infrastructure we can build upon. We always want to be prepared for the unexpected, since the unexpected will eventually occur. But what is that unexpected? We're not always sure what that might be. So we have to protect ourselves in a lot of ways and be dynamic and agile. So we can use tricks and techniques like disk imaging and automation that allows us to patch or remediate thousands of machines within minutes after testing. And something very difficult to accomplish on a traditional endpoint that is, you know, globally deployed and might not be connected to the network and so forth. So it allows us really to come back to a secure point very quickly. We also have tools like Bitdefender and other third-party products that assist with the zero-day attacks, things that we can't foresee. You know, not every zero-day attack is going to be protected, but it will protect some, and that's a different protection you didn't have before. We also want to contain the unknown risks within smaller failure domains and restrict lateral movement. This is a great use of the Citrix Secure Digital Perimeter, basically controlling and containing. And we also, you know, these DR situations of flooding, natural disasters, political unrest has forced many workers not to be able to go to work. And, you know, when I started in IT, I didn't think these ever would occur to me. You know, they definitely have. You know, we all assume it'll never happen, but it can. So having a secure remote access strategy that enables all users to continue to do their work, even when your office is closed, is a tremendous enabler for the business. We also have started looking at a lot of bursting into the cloud for unexpected resources. As we have a new merger and acquisition or a new, you know, application or security patch that increases load, you know, we want to think about how we're going to handle this additional load in the future as it comes up. And then we also want to test and monitor everything. You know, can't underline that enough. You know, we really want to know when the unexpected becomes known as soon as possible so that we can be reactive. So with Citrix, we're really defense in depth. We have several technologies that layer upon this. And so we have a defensible infrastructure, leveraging defense in depth. We have moved the apps and the data back into the data center in the control of IT. We've added the ability to evaluate the endpoint prior to connectivity. Is it a healthy endpoint? Does it have antivirus running on it? Is it patched? And so forth. We also have dynamic and contextual policies that change based off of the scenario. We don't really want to micromanage policies. We'd rather have the system sort of, you know, address the risks appropriately in an automated fashion. And we've overall simplified monitoring by introducing multiple inputs and leveraging analytics to bring it all together. And we've also added additional capabilities that are unique to Citrix, such as the Bitdefender HVI technology, really giving us an overall amazing platform, we believe. Overall, we can isolate and recover very quickly. We can control the failure domain. We can control the lateral movement within one of these areas. We can put additional controls around high-risk components. So we might have multiple secure enclaves of different security levels. We can also understand our environment a lot better now, and we really will need to become more agile, more quick, and we believe this platform can definitely enable that. And we've gained considerable control back to the hands of IT and of security. While at the same time, the key message, we are delivering a great user experience. And that's key, is having a good user experience while still having good security, while also being able to manage it reasonably with operations is really a beautiful kind of coming together of all these technologies And really, that's the presentation. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. Back to Karen for the Q&A.
Thanks so much for that presentation. Excellent, gentlemen. Really wonderful. As was mentioned, it is time for our Q&A portion of the event. So at this time, we'd like to invite you, our listeners, to ask any questions you may have by using that question box on the left side of your screen. And I also want to remind everyone that we do have a related resources right there in the resources tab. So please feel free to check it out between now and the end of our event. So we have quite a few questions that have already come in from the audience. So why don't we jump right in with this first question from Paul. So Paul says, you've been talking about Citrix Secure Zone. I haven't heard about it before. Can you please elaborate more? Is it a new product or architecture type or framework? Can you give us more information? Martin, can you illuminate us?
Yes, I can. Yes, that's actually a really good question, and I hear that a lot. So when we talk about the Citrix Secure Zone, what we are effectively referring to is sometimes called Secure Enclave or a jump server. And the idea is that you just put a specially designed and secured silo of either the XenApp servers or the XenDesktop VDIs that sits between your data and your end users. So this is just the type or architecture of the XenApp and XenDesktop deployments. I wrote a complete blog post which is called Unsinkable, the Myth of IT, where I'm explaining how to build this, what are the components, what are the best practices, and so on. But good question.
Okay, and thanks for, we're getting quite a few thanks to you, Martin. Some folks are really thrilled with the presentation, so thanks for the thanks. Let's jump into the next question here. This comes from Christine. Christine says, what would you recommend to do after CSC has been compromised? What action should we take?
That's also a very good question. So what you want to do is, first of all, you kind of want to have the playbook where you want to know exactly what you are going to do. And this is going to be different for different companies. And it's also going to be different for different security zones. The idea here being, let me give you one example. Talk to your security team and ask them, what do you want us to do when we found that this security zone was compromised? Some security teams are going to tell you just reset the machine. Other security teams are going to advise you reset all the machines here. And other security teams are going to ask you disconnect all users, but leave it exactly as it is because we want to do forensics. So in this case, what to do after security zone is compromised? You want to sit down with your own security zone and understand what they need you to do.
Okay, thanks so much. Let's see. So another question here. Excuse me. This one comes from Don. Don says, we have tried siloing access to applications, Citrix Secure Zones, and still use it in our environment, but found it's hard to manage centrally, especially in regards to patching and management. Do you have any recommendations?
So this always used to be, okay, so I'm originally administrator from the presentation server 4, so a really long history with Citrix technologies. This used to be a big problem in the past, and partially we solved it with the single image management solutions, whether it's PVS or MCS. Both of them are very mature products. What we are recommending today is you actually want to have a look at the Citrix application layering, because it can make the management of all the hotfixes, images, and everything else just much, much, much easier. So I would recommend, if you have a lot of silos, if you have a lot of secure zones, have a look at Citrix application layering, and especially have a look at the layered images.
Okay. You know, we're actually past our time together. I saw that there was one question that came in from Tobias, and he wants to know that he said he was curious about where you gathered all the Secret Service methodology information, and he says it's fascinating. So maybe you could tell us a little bit of background about that.
Oh, yes, I certainly can. So, first of all, Tobias, thank you for joining the webinar. And the research that we've done, it's actually, all of it is public information. So we went through a lot of interviews with former agents. We went through a lot of different books, articles. Most of the pictures that you could actually see are coming from the Library of Congress. And based on this research, what we've done is that we are presenting only information that we could kind of confirm from at least 2 different sources. So there was a lot of fascinating facts that we decided to skip because it was only in one book. And most of these methodologies are actually the same as they were in the 70s and 80s. So even though security consistently keeps improving the technology, the concepts they are doing are still the same. So a lot of research and all of it based on the publicly available information.
Okay, well, we are actually at the end of our time together. I want to apologize. There were quite a few questions that came in that we just aren't going to have time to get to. So anyone who asked a question who we didn't answer live, we'll make sure that you get an answer to your question via email. And I know quite a few people did ask about the PowerPoint. Everyone will get a link at the end of our event for a replay of the presentation. So hopefully that will answer that question as well. So again, I'd like to thank everyone out there for joining us today for our special presentation, Arming IT Security Teams with U.S. Secret Service Tactics. We hope you've enjoyed our event and also took advantage of those additional resources, which can be found at the bottom of the console in the Resources tab. I'm Karen Bannon, and on behalf of Martin Zukek, Eric Byers, Citrix, and everyone at the ZE Media family of publications, thank you for your time and have a great day.